New York City Labor Guide. When to go to the hospital and why families get sent home. One of the most stressful parts of labor in New York City is this. Not just I'm in labor, but when I actually leave for the hospital. Because in New York City, that decision is not only about contractions. It is also about traffic, distance, triage, hospital volume, whether it's your first baby or not, and how to avoid arriving too early or too late. And this is where many families in New York City feel stuck. I'm Sabina from DOULA Base. We support families across New York City and nearby New Jersey with birth and postpartum doula care. And one of the most common questions we hear is, when should we actually leave to go to the hospital? So in this video, I want to walk you through how to think about this decision in real New York City way. Not just the standard labor rule, but the city reality. Here is the short answer. For many families in New York City, timing hospital departure is not just about whether contractions are 5 minutes apart. It is also about how labor is changing in real time. How far are you from hospital? What traffic may look like. How are you coping, and whether it's your first baby or not, and whether there are other symptoms that change the plan completely. So yes, the usual timing rule can help, but in New York City, the usual needs context. And if there is heavy bleeding, decreased fetal movement, or severe pain, or your water broke and the fluid looked greenish, those are situations where your provider may want immediate assessment. Why this feels so different in New York City? A lot of labor advice is built around a simple model. You're at home, you get into the car, you drive to the hospital, the trip is fairly predictable, and admission is mostly about whether labor is far enough along. That is not how birth works in New York City. A family in Park Slope heading to Lower Manhattan is dealing with one kind reality. A family in Jersey City, for example, planning a Manhattan birth is dealing with another. And a family in Queens trying to get to the Upper East Side during evening traffic is dealing with something else entirely. And this is where New York City changed your calculation. In New York, labor timing is not just about physiology. It is also about transit, access, route, unpredictability, and the emotional cost of arriving too early and being sent back into the city. For many families, this is the part no one explains well enough. And I hear stories about families who got a hotel just around the corner of the hospital to avoid the stressful part of traveling back and forth again. The usual rule, 511 or 411. That usually means contractions are every 4 to 5 minutes, lasting for about 1 minute and for the last hour. And yes, that can be a usual reference point, especially in the first labor. But it is not a perfect formula. It is not telling you how the laboring person is coping. It is not telling you whether labor is intensifying quickly. It does not tell you how long the trip will actually take. And it does not account for realities of New York City. In our experience, many families do better when they treat the timing rule as a guide, not as a comment. The real question is often, does labor now looks established? Means established enough that the trip makes sense. That is usually more useful than trying to obey the timer exactly. Why distance and traffic matter more than many first-time parents expect. One of the biggest surprises for first-time parents is how geography matters. If you're living 10 minutes away from your hospital, that gives you one margin. If you're across borders, that gives you another. And if you're coming from Hoboken, Jersey City, or elsewhere in North Jersey, that can change the picture even more. And even in a normal labor, sitting in traffic can feel awful. It can interrupt coping, it can increase stress, it can make contractions feel harder, and it can make the final part of the trip much more intense. A quick New York City reality. Not every family is driving with their own car. Some are taking an Uber, a yellow cab, or a car service. And laboring in the backseat of a car in city traffic can feel very different from laboring at home. So it helps to think through that before labor starts. For example, who is booking the ride? Where are we getting picked up? What route is most likely? And what is our backup plan if labor picks up quickly? And the last question, what do you want or need in the backseat with you? For many families, even a small car plan helps. That means, for example, bring a towel just in case water breaks. Bring a bag if someone needs to throw up, and anything that helps the laboring person stay in the labor zone or labor bubble while someone else is handling the driving. So for many New York City and New Jersey families, the better question is not only what are the contractions doing, it's also what is my travel margin. If labor is steadily building and the route is long and unpredictable, leave a bit earlier may make sense. If your hospital is very close and labor feels still manageable, there is probably more room to stay home longer. The goal is not to rush in. The goal is to match and the departure to both your labor and geography. So let's talk about triage reality in busy New York City hospitals. This is the part many families are not prepared for. Triage. New York City hospitals are often excellent. They are also often very busy. If you arrive too early, especially with your first baby, there is a real possibility that you maybe not be admitted right away. Depending on the clinical picture, you may be asked to walk around, wait, hydrate, or return later. And if no one prepared you for that, it can feel incredibly discouraging. For many families, the hardest part is not labor itself. It is being in labor without being fully settled. So too early for a room, too uncomfortable to really go back home because home feels not safe anymore, and stuck in the in-between place around the hospital. That is one reason timing matters so much in New York City. Families are not always trying to avoid going too late. They are also often trying to avoid the exhausting limbo of early triage without admission. And this is where many first-time parents get stuck. Not because they missed a perfect labor rule, but because early labor and hospital admission are not always the same thing. And just knowing that ahead of time can make the whole experience feeling so much more smooth. Behavior often tells you more than an app. Contraction apps may help, no questions asked, but they do also not tell you the whole story. In many labors, behavior is actually more relevant than the timer. In early labor, many people can still talk comfortable. They can smile, answer questions, talk through contractions, stay relatively outward facing. As labor deepens, that often changes. So conversations drop away. Focus narrows and the body you can see works harder. Movement become more instinctive. Sounds become lower or more involuntary. The laboring person may no longer want to speak through contractions. They may sway, grip, moan, breathing with complete contractions, or withdraw inwards between waves. That kind may shift matters, especially in New York City, where timing the trip can change the whole experience. It often helps to look at pattern and behavior together. Not just how far contractions are apart, but also what are they requiring from the person who are having that. That often gives families a much clearer sense of whether labor is established enough to go to the hospital and to leave home or to stay a little bit longer. First baby or not matters. This is our next topic because a first labor and a later labor do not always unfold the same way. Many first-time parents have a longer early labor, more room to observe, and time to watch pattern build. A second or third birth may not look the same. That does not mean every later labor is fast, but history matters. If someone previously went from manageable contractions to intense labor in a very short time window, that should absolutely shape the departure plan. This is one reason a one-size-fits-all timing advice often falls short. Birth is individual, and New York City logistics makes individualized timing even more important. When the standard rules do not apply, there are specific situations where the usual timing rules are no longer the main question. Many providers would want immediate assessment if there is heavy bright red bleeding, significant decreased fetal movement, severe contract pain rather than wave-like contractions, or fluid that looks green after the water breaks. Your provider may also give you more specific instructions depending on your blood pressure, Group B strap status, rupture of the membrane, baby's position, planned induction, medical condition itself, planned induction, or previous birth history. This is why the best labor plan is never based on internet-based timing rules. It is based on knowing your provider's guidelines and understanding which symptoms can change the plan completely. If you have not asked your provider yet, what would make them want you to come in immediately? This is a very good question, and you want to ask before labor begins. What New Jersey families need to think about. If you, for example, live in Jersey City, Hoboken, Weehawken, Fort Lee, or elsewhere in North Jersey, and you're planning a Manhattan birth, the logistics usually need even more care. That what looks close on the map can feel much further in labor. So many families in New Jersey benefit from having an actual travel plan before labor starts. Not a vague idea, a real plan. Which route is most likely, which time windows are hard, who is driving, whether partner, doula, or car service makes the most sense, and what the backup plan is if labor picks up quickly. That kind of planning reduces panic and stress. Stress you don't want to have in labor. It always helps families staying home longer with more confidence because the transition sometimes really be tough. If you're crossing into Manhattan for birth, your labor plan should be including the route, not just the contractions. How doula support changes the timing question. One of the most practical benefits of experienced doula support in New York City is helping with labor timing. A doula does not replace medical care, and a doula does not make hospital admission decisions. But many families find it deeply helpful having an experienced person looking at the full picture. Not only the timing, but the coping changes, the labor rhythm itself, the emotional shift, the home environment, the transition reality, and the bigger pattern. In our experience, that often helps families staying grounded, longer at home, and leave with more confidence. And in a city where leaving too early can create hours of unnecessary strain, that matters. For so many families, doula support is not just only the emotional support. It is better decision-making and sometimes under pressure. What to prepare before labor starts. The best time to start thinking about hospital timing is before labor begins. Families usually feel much calmer when they already know how long the trip usually takes, what traffic may look like, where to enter the hospital, what their provider told them about, when to call, and what the plan is if labor starts overnight. It also helps to think through less glamorous details. Who is caring for older children? Are phones charged? Is the hospital bag prepared? Do you know the backup route? And what happens if we are told to walk, wait, or return later? Preparation does not make labor predictable, but it often makes decision-making steadier, especially in New York City. The biggest misunderstandings. One is the idea that contraction timing alone tells you exactly when to leave. It does not. Another is the idea that early is always safer. Sometimes early arrival is appropriate, but in many straightforward labors, arriving too early means a long and tiring triage process without admission. Another misunderstanding is that the hospital will immediately take over the moment you arrive. Often there is still an assessment, a waiting period, and a decision about whether labor is far enough along to stay. And many families assume they will somehow just know exactly the right timing to leave. Sometimes they do, but often it is more gradual than that, more like an accumulation of signs, not just one dramatic movie moment. Let's summarize. So when should you go to the hospital in New York City for labor? Usually not based on contractions alone. The timing often depends on contraction pattern, coping changes, distance, traffic, birth history, provider guidance, and whether anything is happening that needs immediate evaluation. That is what makes the question feel a bit different in New York City. If you're planning a birth in New York City or nearby New Jersey and want experienced birth and postpartum support, DOULA BASE helps families find the right fit through our network for trusted doulas. If this is helpful, subscribe, and in the comments tell me what part of labor timing feels most confusing or stressful to you right now.